Hello everybody, I'm Nate the Movie Guy, and today I'll be reviewing the brand new, experimental, indie, micro-budget horror film, Skinamarink. Two children wake up in the middle of the night to find their father is missing and all of the windows and doors in their home have vanished. Skinamarink is analog horror brought to the big screen. If you don't know what analog horror is, it is a fairly recent, new subgenre of horror where it takes, the story, something scary, and presents it through like vintage means such as like VHS tapes or film reels or things like that. And a lot of analog horror stories tend to be ambiguous or deal with the uncanny valley, or both. And this movie does both. It deals with the uncanny valley, things that look human but they might not be, or the actual story going on in this movie is not presented directly to the audience. It is in the background, it is underneath the scares and the atmosphere. And speaking of atmosphere, this is that movie's favorite word, atmosphere. Every single shot of this movie is from either a high angle or a very low angle. And so it almost feels like we're seeing this dark house from the point of view of the two kids that the film follows. And another thing too, every shot is either underexposed and we cannot see, clearly what is going on in a shot, or it's overexposed where again we cannot see clearly because it's too bright. And almost every shot in this movie is either of a bright television screen where the two kids watch all of these old like public domain cartoons, which says so in the credits, which is interesting, or it's showing us a pitch black hallway or a pitch black room, and it's so dark it almost swallows you whole and you get lost in it. There was this like tightening in my chest almost the entire runtime. On a side note, that would be my one complaint with the movie. This movie is not perfect. For one big reason, it is too long. It is way too long. It's an hour and 40 minutes, 100 minutes. There is a great 75-80 minute movie in here. The first act, or maybe perceived first act, is very long. The setup, it takes a while to get going, but when it does, it grabs you by the throat and does not let you go, even after it's over. I walked out of that theater with my buddy AJ, who I saw it with today, and we were laughing, not because we thought it was laughably bad or we thought it was funny, but because it was so uncomfortable that we couldn't help but laugh. You know that thing when you get really uncomfortable, really nervous, and you just start to laugh? That's what happened to us. And I'm all there for it. I thought that a movie hasn't done that for me in a really long time. This movie unsettled me to my core. Especially like the implications of it all too just deeply upset me. And not in being upset is not a good thing, but it wasn't upset because I felt offended by it and its implications. Its implications are just sad and upsetting because all of these horrible things are happening to two little kids, and seeing what happens to them throughout the runtime of this movie is it's terrible. And again, the implied story behind it all, underneath it all, makes it even worse. And there was a point in the movie towards the end where it finally hit me what this movie was really about, and I cried. It just tears were rolling down my face because again, these terrible things are happening to two little kids who are without help, without parents, and they can't leave their house. So they're just trapped dealing with all of this terrible stuff, and it upset me, and it affected me, and that's what good horror should do. If you are deeply, upsetted or terrified by the uncanny or jump scares, stay away. Stay far away from this movie. I don't typically jump at jump scares, and while I didn't, there are only a few. There's not many, but when there are, it's like an assault on the senses. This movie is very quiet most of the time. So when there is a jump scare, it's loud and overwhelming. It's such effective tension and then release of that tension, because that's what good jump scares are supposed to do, relieve that tension. And I think what makes this movie stand out for me is that even though we get a jump scare, that tension is relieved, it never goes away. It might just be relieved in one moment, or the nature of the jump scare just makes it more intense anyway. And there are shots in this movie that will stick with me, and I will see in my nightmares. And the final shot especially, I think, is my favorite final shot in any movie. This movie is so scary, guys. I thought it was fantastic analog horror, and I'm really, really glad that it got a theater release, because this movie was made on a budget of $15,000. And my theater was, I thought me and my friend were going to be the only two in there, and there were a lot of people in our theater, and it was great. And the experience was really cool. It will be releasing on the streaming service Shudder later this year. They don't have a specific date announced yet, just sometime this year. It was picked up by IFC Midnight, who will be putting it on Shudder. And they also decided to give it a very tiny, limited theater run just this weekend. But I really hope it does well. This movie will turn a profit. And again, my theater was packed, and I even went online and looked at available seating for showtimes later in the day and at other theaters near me, and they were fairly full. And from what I'm hearing from other people online that got to see this in theaters as well, that their theaters were also pretty full. And that makes me very happy, especially as someone who loves experimental horror, who loves indie horror, who wants to support this kind of stuff. It makes me really, really happy to know that people are seeing this movie and supporting it. And I'm really glad I was home still, because I know my theater in my small college town would not get this movie. I did look on their website, and no, they didn't. So yeah, Skinamarink, obviously, I'd be surprised if you couldn't guess this, gets the Nate seal of approval. Thank you guys so much for the support on the channel, as always. And yeah, support low budget indie horror, and drink water, because I didn't drink enough water today, and I'm losing my voice because of it. That's my fault. No one to blame but me. But yeah, anyway, have a good day, guys. Thanks for watching.